I'm going to start off with a summary, and we're going to do that by looking at the days unsold inventory compared to the 10-year median. What we're doing with days unsold inventory is how rapidly would you turn over the existing marketplace at the existing rate of sales. The 10-year median is looking at the median for the previous 10 years for the same week, and then doing a ratio. 2 weeks ago, on March 8th, when I did this presentation, we were at 123%, 124%, call it, for Silicon Valley. Santa Clara County was basically at 108%. San Mateo County was 134%, and Alameda County was 127%. Keep in mind, the higher the number, the longer the turnover rate. So all these numbers are above 100%, so we're slower than we are typically for this time of the year. We can still be in a fast marketplace, but we are slower than we are typically. But now let's just jump up to current day and look at the difference. Right off the bat, the visualization of the saturated blue and a good part of the valley is clear. And I brought over the numbers so you don't have to remember them. We went from 124 to 138. We went from 108 to 123%. We went from 134 to 150% and 127 to 154%. And that's in just 2 weeks. This rate of slowdown has dramatically increased. I've actually maintained that the slowdown started on Valentine's Day of this year and is continuing and is accelerating. Let's get into the regular presentation. We're here to talk about the Silicon Valley real estate market ending the week of March 22nd, 2025. And that means I gathered the data on the morning of March 22nd, 2025, which I did. And then I'm presenting it at 9 o'clock. So no time lag at all. These are the key chapters. You can click to each one in the YouTube description below with the timestamp. You can skip to the sections you like the most. Here is the first summary slide. Here what we're looking at is 5 key components plus overbidding, really. Inventory is obviously key. That's how many sellers there are. You can see that, just 11 weeks ago, we were very low inventory right on top of the red line. So that's the least inventory you'd expect. Basically, 8 weeks ago, we got up to typical levels of inventory. And now we're almost this week, currently right here, you're almost at the most inventory you'd expect. What is that in terms of numbers? Well, you've roughly doubled from 1,180 to 2,340, call it rough numbers. So you've roughly doubled your inventory, but inventory normally grows at this time of the year, but you went from 80% of normal, so a 20% shortage, to a 31% surplus. So you've gained 50% of your inventory in just 13 weeks. Moving on to offers accepted. You can see you started off sort of on the blue line, you dipped below the blue line, then you were above the blue line, and we are still above the blue line. But to me, the noteworthy thing is notice how flat purple line, the data line, is this week when normally it's increasing. So normally you have an increasing number of offers from last week to this week based on the past 10 years. This year, we're basically flat. In the past 13 weeks, we've gone from 1,300 offers accepted to 2,050. So not even a doubling. So your inventory has doubled. Your offers have gone up by about 50%. Because if you take 1,350, call it, and add half of that, you're getting a number of just shy of 2,050. You went from 76% of the inventory you'd expect to 85%. So you've only gained 9 percentage points of the offers accepted. Meanwhile, your inventory has gone up by 50 percentage points. That's why the market's changing so rapidly. You've gained 50% on your inventory. You've only gained 10% on your offers. Then days of unsold inventory, you can see that last year, 13 weeks ago, we were faster than typical. So even though you may not have had a lot of offers and a lot of inventory, the turnover rate was more rapid than normal. Then we sort of cooled off. And then basically 5 weeks ago, we were right at the coolest the market would expect. And notice the last 2 weeks, we've gone up when the cool line is normally going down. So now we're above. So we're actually slower now. The days unsold inventory in raw numbers is a larger number right now than you would expect it to be based on the past 10 years. What are we talking about? We've gone from 31 days to 40 days. You went from 96%, 4% faster than normal, to 38% slower than normal, a shift of 42% in the slowing down direction. Now, this data here, days on market, might seem bizarre to people in the fact that it's still a fairly strong indicator. But the reason for that is at this time of the year, you carry over very few listings at the end of the year. And so most of the listings on the market have zero. Those are the ones that are getting attention from the buyer. And because the buyers aren't as numerous as the new sellers are, the buyers are able to focus their efforts on the stuff that's only been on the market for 1 week and 2 weeks and not going back and buying stuff that's been on for 3 and 4 weeks. Let's look at what we're talking about. We went from 45 days to sell 3/4 of your properties to 16 days. Dramatic improvement. You went from longer than normal to faster than normal. But again, the noteworthy thing is just the last couple of weeks, notice you're pulling away from the red line, and you're now at least halfway between the red line and the gray line, and the purple line, the data line, is increasing, and the gray line's flat or to decreasing. So in another week or two, we'll probably cross over. We've gone from 26% longer than normal to 10%, 11% faster than normal. We've gone from 45 days to 16 days. You're selling, 3 out of 4 sellers are selling in just over 2 weeks. But again, this is an indicator that's contradictory to the other thing, but it's one I wouldn't put a lot of weight on just because the inventory starts off at 0. But I would also, even with that caveat, say, look at the last 2 weeks. The purple line is pulled away a little bit from the red line at a time when things are getting closer together. So the market is even showing a change on days on market if you look carefully. Price cuts. This is the difference between sellers' expectations and market reality. Sellers have their expectations, as do listing agents, buyers agents, and buyers. And this is sort of a measure of how they're in line. You can see that we were pretty typical price reductions up until about 2 weeks ago. And now you've dipped down, and we're now taking larger price reductions than typical. Not more than you would expect on the blue line. So we're not down to a cool marketplace, but still more than typical. What are we talking about? A quarter ago, we were only taking 1.25% price reductions. Clearly a small number, but that was 25% greater price reductions than normal. So in rough terms, I don't know what the math works out to be. Maybe normally it would be 0.9% reduction. Now, in the current week, we are only taking a 0.5% price reduction, but that 0.5% price reductions is actually double what it normally is. So at this time of the year, we're normally only taking 0.25%. So, it may sound fantastic that we're only taking a 0.5% price reduction on average, but the real key, in my opinion, is comparing it to where you'd expect the market to be. And that is, we're taking twice as large price reductions as we'd expect. Overbidding is on here more as a curiosity because it lags behind. Typically, a quarter ago, we'd be at 3.8% overbidding, and we were at 5.1, so 1.3% more overbidding. And now the current week, 6.3 is typical, and you're at 8. So you're 2.4%. So the magnitude of overbidding is actually increased, even compared to typical. But again, notice that the last week, this has been flat when all the hit lines, the thin lines, the indicator lines are going up. That's saying the market's not following the normal trend. And remember, this lags behind. If, as I speculate, the market changed on Valentine's Day, that's basically 4 or 5 weeks ago now, depending on how you count them. And this data is just going to start showing up next week. Now what we're doing is we're looking all the way back to January 1st, 2015. The first 9 years are on a condensed scale, so we can fit everything in. You got the bolder year date lines here, January 1st of each year, and then you got the quarter, beginning of second quarter, beginning of third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, and the beginning of the new year. You can see the key line here is, these are all the key lines. The purple is inventory. Look at your inventory low at the January 1st, and it's climbed from basically somewhere around 73% of expected inventory to 130%. So you went from almost a 30% shortage of inventory to basically a 30% surpluses. At the same time, your offers went from a 30% shortage up to only a 10% shortage. And notice this reversal this last week, and we're now down to a 15% shortage of offers. So at a time when your inventory has been increasing, your offers have reversed and have actually decreased. That's really going to start impacting days of unsold inventory going forward. And then the last graph on here is days of unsold inventory, the gray line. And you went from basically somewhere around 92%, 8% are faster than you typically are. You went up. Here is basically the improvement for Valentine's Day. Remember, every holiday negatively impacts real estate except for two. Mother's Day and Valentine's Day both have a slight positive impact. So this dip was basically the Valentine's positive impact. So if you ignore that, you basically have a straight up line on your days unsold inventory getting slower and slower. And you're now at basically that 137% of normal. Now what we're doing is we're looking at each component individually. You have your inventory on the purple line is the data line. You can see we went from very limited inventory at the first of the year, not only limited inventory as it is limited every year, but we were also on the red side, the least amount of inventory you'd expect. This week, what are we, 12 weeks, probably only 11 weeks. This is the 11th week of the year, and we're already now at the blue line. So you've gone from the least inventory you'd expect to the most inventory you'd expect. And based on the rate of the slope, I would expect that we're going to cross over and be above the most inventory you'd expect. And just look back over the last 10 years, you're rarely above the blue line on inventory. This is the inventory. What we do here is we take the typical line, the gray line, and we pull it out straight and plot a percentage. So you will gone from basically somewhere around 72% of the inventory you'd expect to somewhere around 135% of the inventory you'd expect. This is now looking at the offers. And offers last year, we were on the low side, but we also had limited inventory. Now you can see we came off and we were doing a little bit better for the first couple of weeks of the new year, but now we've been below the gray line. And again, noteworthy is where we look like we're going to roll over like the blue line does, sort of a cold marketplace trend, even though a typical marketplace trend is you're going up until the middle of second quarter. So the fact that we appear to be rolling over, I think I even made that comment last week, it looked like we rolled over. So we're having a very slow rollover. And next week, we will probably be on, again, up very, very little or actually potentially reduced. Here's compared to the 10-year normal. So you pull out that gray line, make it straight. You can see that last week we did the highest percentage of normal. You're basically at 90% of normal. Actually, it's about 91%. So only missing about 9% of the number of offers you'd expect. And now we're down at about 85%. So you've dropped about 6 percentage points in 1 week. This is looking at the ratio between the two. And this is obviously more important because you can have a lot of inventory and a lot of offers and still have a fast-paced marketplace, or you can have a low number of inventory and a low number of offers and still have a fast marketplace. This is looking at the balance between the two, and you can see that basically last week we did this abrupt turn, and we've gone from the slowest marketplace to the longest turnover rate that you expect, and now we're even longer. So we're now taking 40 days to sell your existing inventory, and then at least the longest you'd expect is probably somewhere down around 35 days. So you're taking almost a week longer than you would expect. And that's a little bit of exaggeration. It's probably closer to 4 days, but still you're longer turnover rate than normal. Here's pulling the gray line straight. And again, if you look at this, if you ignore the improvement that we appear to have for Valentine's Day, you've been basically slowing down since the first of the year, and you're rapidly approaching that 40% longer marketing time. Here's the 75th percentile. So 3/4 of the sellers. Normally, look at this. You're turning around somewhere in second quarter, close to middle of second quarter. We turned around, we bottomed out probably right at Valentine's Day, and then we were flat for, that looks like 2 weeks. We went up for 1 week, went flat for a week, and we went up for a week. So, the marketing time is, even though it's still currently low and below where it typically is, it's turning around and increasing at a time of the year when we're normally still decreasing. Now, I will point out, and I don't understand why, we also turn around and dropped earlier. And dropping earlier is sort of a bizarre thing that I just have no explanation for other than it's there. And I have not found any indication that my data shifted, and I can't be shifted because if I was off on my x-axis, we'd be in the future, and you obviously can't have data for the future. So for whatever reason, the marketing time dropped earlier than it typically does, and we're already cooling off earlier than we typically do. And I would actually maintain if the turnaround point for going up is here, you're off by a full quarter, where here you're only off by half a quarter. So the acceleration of this shift back in time is increased almost. It's like we've gone 2 weeks for every week since the first of the year. Here is the compared to typical. Here's your huge improvement because we were improving earlier than normal. And there's basically Valentine's Day and the reversal. And now you're going and turning around and cooling off very rapidly. No indication this is going to turn around. I will point out again, as I've had in the past, here is your basically Valentine's Day of 2022. And we're basically on the same pattern where we went down going into Valentine's Day. Coming out of Valentine's Day, you cooled off and you just kept on cooling off. And we all know that 2022 was one of the worst years that we've had in a long time. Here's the sellers, 10% of the sellers that are taking the largest price reductions. So I'm just looking at the top 10%. So the sellers that are going from 100% to 90 percentile on their price reductions. And what are they doing? Well, they were taking very little price reductions, and they went from between normal and cooler than normal, less price reductions than normal. I'm sorry, more price reductions than normal and normal price reductions to normal. And then they went to less price reductions. But again, since Valentine's Day, they went back to normal. And in the last 3 weeks, it looks like on this table, they've turned around and they started to intake more increases. Now, granted, the number is not that great high. It's basically 9.75%, so just shy of a 10% price reduction, which for the sellers that are taking that 10% price reduction is significant. But again, this is only the sellers that are taking the greatest price reductions. What are they taking? And so the sellers that are taking the greatest reductions are taking that 10% price reduction. And because so few sellers take price reductions, the average number becomes reasonable again. Here's pulling out the gray line and making it normal. You can see the huge improvement right earlier in this beginning part of the year. Again, the turning point to me is Valentine's Day. And now we've been rocketing up and we've been taking larger and larger price reductions. We're now taking something like 30% more price reductions. And this, again, is only for the top 10% of the sellers. So the sellers that are taking the biggest price reductions. But if you go back in time, there isn't that much time when we were taking larger price reductions. So it is a tight metric. This is the average, and this is on here just to show I prefer the 10 percentile or the one that I do for the distribution, which is from 2.5 to 17.5%. But this is on here just to quickly show you that I'm not playing games. You can see that you improved compared to normal. This is slightly greater than normal price reductions, slightly less than normal price reductions. And now in the last couple of weeks, you've been taking greater than normal price reductions again. And that's average. So that's everybody in a blender. And if you look at the magnitude of it, you can tell quite easily. You're just over 0.5% of a price reduction. So, that tells you if 10% of the sellers are taking 10% and the average is only 0.5, you can see how rapidly it drops off that 10%. Here's comparing it to normal. So you can see you started off the year at slightly more price reductions than you cooled off. The least amount of price reductions compared to normal was right at around Valentine's Day, and then you've improved. And look at just the drop this last week. And with the huge influx of inventory that I even noticed for the clients I'm working with, there's going to be an increase in future price reductions because that's competition for the sellers that haven't sold already. Here's the frequency of price reductions. So how common is price reductions? It was less common all the beginning part of this year because you're between the typical line and the least common. But now again, since Valentine's Day, you turned around and you came up. Now you're not dramatically above the typical, but you're on the cool side. And if you look back, the last time we were on the cool side is right about here, which was basically as we were recovering off after the 2023 slowdown. So it is significant that we're above the typical line. It's an area we have not been in for basically 2 years. Here is the same information with the gray line pulled out straight. You can see the huge improvement at the beginning of the year, the huge slowdown. you're now at 20% slower than normal. And you can see in 2022 and 2023, it was higher than that. And also in 2019, which was a mighty slowdown, especially for Santa Clara County. A lot of the other areas didn't participate, but Santa Clara really did. Here's the overbidding. And again, look at the turnaround right here. You can sort of see you rolled over and you're actually even down on this plotting. So this is the median overbidding. So 6%. So that means half the buyers bid more than 6% over the seller's ask price, and half the buyers bid less than 6% over the seller's ask price. Pulling it out compared to normal, you can see the right lot. It looks like 2 weeks ago was the hottest marketplace. Last week would have been right about here. And now this week we're down here. So we're still overbidding more than normal. And it looks like it's about 2.5% more than normal, but we're on the way down basically to typical. Whether we get there or not is whose guess. This is the frequency of overbidding. So how common is overbidding? And you can see right now it's somewhere around 74% of the sellers are getting more than their ask price. And again, this is for Silicon Valley, which is made up of Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Alameda counties. So 3 counties make up Silicon Valley. And you can see that you're taking the overbidding is actually more common than it typically is. Here's the frequency. So even though it's more common, it's cooling off. And we've been in this overbidding, more frequent overbidding for the past year and a half to 2 years, closer to a year and a half. Here's pricing. If you look very carefully, I think there's an indication that this last data point has rolled over a little bit. It's not flat yet, but it's up very slightly from the week before. So again, it looks like we may be rolling over right at end of first quarter, and price point is normally in second quarter. So to me, it looks like we're going to peak very early this year on peak pricing for the year. Here's the payments that each person would experience going through an 80% loan using the high balance conforming loan for the national average, which is sort of a bogus number, but it's one that easily has access to, and jumbo money would just be across the board a little bit lower. So it gives you an accurate representation of whether payments are going up or down for the typical buyer. It's not going to be an exact payment, and it's also just an estimate for property taxes and insurance. Here now we're looking at distributions. This is days on marketplace. We're starting off a year ago on the dotted line, which is down here, which is below the purple line, the current line. So the market this year, the purple line, is cooler than the market was a year ago. So there you improve for another week, and then you improve there. So you still have the chance of improving based on where the market went last year. And then the market slows down, and then it stays there until Halloween. And then right around Halloween, right about now, it's going to start cooling off for the end of the year. There's sort of the slow of the year. Now you're accelerating rapidly. And now pay attention and look at where you are. The market's already turned around and cooled off. If we go back, right there was the hottest marketplace we had this year. And the purple line is already above it. So even though last year the market was still improving for another week or two, we've already turned around this year. See, there's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So we've already been taking longer marketing time for the past 3 weeks, even though we normally, or at least last year, we continue to get less marketing time. So your marketing time is increasing earlier than it should be compared to last year. Let's look at the largest price reductions. This is one that I think is the most interesting. You start off ignoring the top 2.5%, and that's to get rid of errors. And then you only go down to 17.5%. So I'm looking at a 15% segment of the marketplace. And you can see the reason I cut off so early is you can see here at 10%, these are all our zeros. I'm really only looking at 2.5% to 10% for the current week, because once you hit here, the overshoot here is just some bizarre thing of the way Excel plots the data. If I had more data points, it would come up and turn flatter. But, I can't control that without getting more data, which is something I'm toying with doing. But anyway, you can see that in this case, for the current week, 90% of the sellers are doing no price reduction whatsoever. So it's only these 10% of these sellers that are taking any price reduction whatsoever, and you can see the distribution of them. But again, let's look at what happens. So the market heated up until about the middle, April 26th it was. Then you sort of slow down and you get down to the summer doldrums where you just sort of bounce around. And then again, sometime shortly after Halloween, we'll see a huge cooling off right about there. And there's the bottom of the marketplace, and then it heats up. And let's pay attention. The market was significantly hotter. That right there, that's the peak. That's the peak right there of the year. The least price reductions, because the closer you get up to this red line is the least price reductions. So we're reducing more. And so we basically had about 3 weeks of sellers taking larger price reductions, even though last year it actually got hotter for another week. Again, these are all warning signs that this year is different than our typical year. Here's buyer overbidding this. And so here, the dotted line is a year ago. And frankly, here, the purple line is above last year. So based on overbidding, the market is still hotter than it was last year. But do keep in mind, there's a 5-week lag time. So if the market did turn right around Valentine's Day, the sale data, the overbidding bidding information is just becoming available now. So going forward, I'd expect it to start cooling off. So there you can see that we were increasing last year. There's the peak right around April 20th. Actually, it was around May 10th, it looks like. Now you got down to the summer. And then instead of turning it Halloween, this is going to turn closer to Thanksgiving. So we'll pay attention. And right now, right there. Actually, that was December 20th. I think I must have missed it by a week to by 2 weeks. But look at it, it's cooling off, heating up. So the overbidding hasn't started to reverse yet on the distribution, because last week, very little change between last week and this week. But if I go back 2 weeks, so that's an improvement, and that's basically a wash. So basically from last week to this week, the overbid is unchanged. Now we're looking at the 3 counties. We're looking at San Mateo County in the orange, Santa Clara County in the blue, and Alameda County in the gray, which has the most inventory. Flipping over and looking at offers. So even though Alameda County has the most inventory, it has fewer offers accepted at 80. So the speed of the marketplace in Santa Clara is going to be faster than in Alameda County. And San Mateo County is a much smaller county, but you can see that their level of offers accepted is down compared to where it was before the pandemic for San Mateo County. Here's days unsold inventory. So Santa Clara County has the fastest. Notice that we're sort of flat across the bottom. San Mateo County is second, sort of flat across the bottom. And I'm going to say that Alameda County is the slowest at something like 45 days, but it's sort of flat across the bottom too. If you look at it, it may be still improving, and all San Mateo and Alameda County may be still improving. Out Santa Clara County is clearly flat, but I'd call all 3 relatively flat. This is marketing time. Notice they've all turned and all started to increase. Yes, San Mateo County improved last week, but it's still a higher number than it was about 4 weeks ago. So it looks like shortly after Valentine's Day was the peak of the least amount of marketing time for 3 out of 4 sellers to sell. This is their magnitude of sale price reductions. You can see all 3 counties are starting to increase the magnitude of price reductions. And this is average. So you can see Santa Clara County is about 0.25%. San Mateo County and Alameda County is about 0.75%. So very small when you look at the average. Frequency of price reductions. Santa Clara County is the least frequent at about 6.5%. It looks like San Mateo County is about 9%. And Alameda County is at 10%. And that was why when you look at this, when you put all 3 in a blender, it's less than 10% of the seller, because the big county with the most price reductions is Alameda with 10%. Here's looking at the frequency of overbidding. You can see we basically are going from 70 to 78%, with Santa Clara County having the most frequent overbidding and San Mateo County being the least frequent. It is sort of interesting that with Alameda County being the slowest marketplace, you'd expect it to have the least amount of overbidding, but it doesn't always follow that. And in this particular case, it's not following that trend. Here's the long-term appreciation. Santa Clara County has the highest appreciation at something like 115% appreciation since 2015. San Mateo County and Alameda County are basically very close to a tie at 82% appreciation. So Santa Clara County has clearly done better than the other two counties. Here's your pricing. San Mateo County is the most expensive, Santa Clara County second, and Alameda County is the most affordable. They're all relatively close to the same, where they're below their peak pricing in 2022 and are also 2024. However, Santa Clara County is above. So Santa Clara County is now at record high median sale prices. Here's the same information on regular paper. The previous was on logarithmic graph paper. Here's the estimated payment going through the same formula using an 8% loan. Now we're looking at the active inventory. So you can see blue is favoring the buyers, a slow marketplace, ice cold marketplace. That would be a lot of inventory. So you can see you have a lot of inventory. Santa Clara County, 25% more than normal. San Mateo County, 18% more than normal. And Alameda County, 32% more than normal. This is your offers accepted. Again, it's blue in color. That favors the buyer, sort of a cool marketplace. Santa Clara County, though, is at 88%, so pretty close, only missing 12% of the marketplace. San Mateo County missing 10% of the marketplace, and Alameda County missing 20%. So Alameda County is pulling down the rest of the areas, but overall, we're missing 15% for Silicon Valley. Here's the days unsold inventory. This is what we started off with. You can see how blue it is. It's basically saturated blue. In fact, I think I'm going to go revisit my numbers. I think it's going to end up being saturated next week, even if I do change the numbers. My thought process is I did the same amount above and below 100. And when you're doing a range of a fixed magnitude and you're below 100%, that's a bigger percentage than above. And I think the constant percentage makes more sense. Here's your actual raw count. So this is where it gets confusing. So even though we're in a slow marketplace for where we should be at this time of the year, we're still in a fast marketplace. Silicon Valley would sell out all its inventory in 40 days, Santa Clara County in 32 days, San Mateo County in 40 days, and Alameda County is at 49 days. So if you're outside of Alameda County, you're still feeling a fairly fast-paced marketplace. And even in Alameda County, areas like Castro Valley, Dublin, Livermore, Fremont, and Union City and Newark are still all under that 30-day time frames. So you still are in a rapid marketplace. You expect things to sell quickly, but you're not expecting them to sell as quickly as they should be selling, if that makes sense. Here's your marketing time, just a different way to measure it. So how long is it taking 3/4 of the sellers to sell? Silicon Valley is selling out in 16 days, Santa Clara County in 13. So Santa Clara County is under 2 weeks, San Mateo County is just over 2 weeks, and Alameda County is at 2.5 weeks. Here's the ask price reduction. So it's not very common. It's sort of typical levels right around, typical levels is anywhere from a 0.25% reduction to a 1% price reduction. Where you're red hot is where you're taking less than a 0.25% price reduction. You can see the coast is taking a 3% price reduction. I think that got up to 6%, believe it or not. Here's the frequency of price reductions. So again, even though the market's slow, very few sellers are taking price reductions. That means the sellers are doing their homework. And for the most part, they're adjusting their price before they come on the marketplace to reflect the new market. Here's the magnitude of overbidding. Still fairly significant overbidding. Frequency of overbidding, common in all areas, 75% in Santa Clara County, 75% overall, 78% in San Mateo County, and Alameda County is at 74%. So all three counties are real close to 75%. So that means 3 out of 4 sellers are getting more than they were asking for their house. Here's the long-term appreciation. You can see the more affordable areas are not the most affordable, but the moderately affordable areas are the areas that are sort of appreciating the best overall since 2015. Your areas closer to the job center have no longer paying that huge premium to be close to work because people are doing more remote working. Here's the sold price. In addition to following the median sold price, which is the middle number, I sandwich it with the least amount that you'd expect, the 10 percentile, and the most, the 90 percentile. So in each micro market area, you'd have a range that you'd expect to find single family homes in. And all this presentation's on single family homes. This is a summary, and you can see the blue over here on the fundamentals. So even though this is what, in my opinion, drives the marketplace, you still have what people would consider to be a fast-paced marketplace. We have a lot of inventory, we don't have a lot of offers, but what is selling is still selling very quickly and for over ask price. Here's the numbers for those that want to look at it. Look at the increase in new listings, pretty much a 25% across the board increase in the number of new listings coming on the market in the last 5 weeks. But your inventory has only gone up about 5% overall, and your offers have only gone up 1%. So that's going to result in a huge increase in inventory if we continue to get a lot of new listings without an increase in the number of offers going out. You can see the days unsold inventory increased overall Silicon Valley by 1.5 days. It was the most increase in Alameda County. The other two were pretty nominal, about a half a day. Anyway, you can pick out whatever metric number you like the best and look at the actual raw numbers. Here again is pointing out the lack of offers. Last year in 2024, we had the lowest number of offers. Here we have the second least number. So we're 7 fewer transactions than last year. So last year was the least. This year we had 7 more, so we're the second least. Last year, and this is Valentine's week, we were worst in 2024. Here in 2025, we had 50 transactions more. Down here, I'm paying attention to not the current or last year, but the previous record. So the previous record was back in 2009 for the second worst, but we're only having 22 more transactions. This will become the second least because these transactions will fail where all the transactions from 2029 have already failed, and that historical number is not going to go down. So we're going to lose more than 22. We're going to lose more than 17. So these will become the second worst year. Right now, they're the third worst year. And the current week is already the second worst year without even taking into consideration any additional transactions that fail. So again, for all of 2025, we're basically record or second record lowest year as far as number of offers accepted. We have been talking about the Silicon Valley real estate market for March 22nd, 2025. We will be talking about the greater Bay Area, 5 regions, 13 counties. To get the archive on YouTube, type in the blue YouTube URL or type in the shorter green root URL and it will take you to the same channel. Type in the green root URL 2025 Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and you get to the live presentations. If you want the handout, 67-page PDF of the PowerPoint presentation that we went over, type in the green root URL H for handout 2025-03-22 and you get today's handout. And any specific past episode you can get to by just typing the green root URL without the H, the year, month, date code, and that go directly to that episode, or you can go to the YouTube channel. I'm Richard Calhoun, real estate broker with Creekside Realty, representing buyers or sellers in Silicon Valley on single agency transactions. Appreciate a like and a subscription. Anyone having questions regarding real estate, feel free to reach out to me on statistics or anything in general. Let's go on to the Greater Bay Area. Here are the 5 regions that we're going to be covering. We have been talking about the Silicon Valley at great length. We will be adding in the cities, San Francisco and Marin, the North Bay, 4 counties, San Joaquin and Sacramento make up the Central Valley, and Santa Cruz and Monterey make up the Central Coast. This is for single family dwellings only. Then the 10-year metric I'm using is 2015 through and including 2024. Here is the active inventory. You can see inventory is going up in all 5 regions. So you could argue that it's fairly flat in the Central Coast, and I wouldn't dispute that, but it's going up in the other 4 for sure. Number of offers is increasing. The rate of increase is slower. The slope of the line is slower in both the cities and in the Central Coast, much more abrupt in the other 3 regions. You can see that Silicon Valley has started to roll over. It looks like North Bay may have rolled over a little bit next. It looks like, it's a week behind Silicon Valley. In other words, this looks like last week's up, but at a lower level, and then fairly flat next week. And Central Valley is still increasing straight across the board with no let up in sight. Days on sold inventory, the turnover rate of the marketplace, you look like you're going down in 3 of the regions. 2 of the regions, the leading regions, Silicon Valley and the cities, have both turned around and have started to increase. Cities is probably for 1 week, and Silicon Valley, I could argue, is for probably 2 weeks. Here's marketing time. This is how long does it take 3/4 of the sellers to sell their property. And you can see it's definitely going up in Silicon Valley. I would call it flat in the cities because you had an up and down. And it looks like it's bottomed out in the Central Valley. Both the North Bay and the Central Coast are still going down, which would be an improving marketplace. Price reductions. Silicon Valley, it has the least amount of price reductions. It's flat from last week at somewhere around 0.5% price reduction. The cities is increasing the amount of price reductions and is approaching 1%. North Bay and Central Valley are just over 1%, and they both reverse direction from less price reductions to more price increases this last week. And then the Central Coast, the smallest one, is taking a 2% reduction, and it looks like it's still decreasing the amount of price reductions that's happening in the Central Coast. Frequency of price reductions. How common are price reductions? Turning around and becoming more common in the Silicon Valley. It's up, probably got down to 8%, and it's probably back up to 9% now, which is still not a lot. 1 in 11 sellers are reducing their price. Cities has bottomed out at 10% and then went up to probably 12%. The other 3 regions are still going down, with North Bay being the most flat and potentially be flat and up next week. Central Valley and Central Coast are both down sharply, which would be fewer sellers taking price reductions. This is one of the things that's important to pay attention, is not all 5 regions are going to change the same. If you listen to the earlier part of the presentation, I maintain that Silicon Valley has turned directions basically since Valentine's Day. The other regions could be lagging behind or ahead. In this particular case, they look like the cities is the next closest, and the other 3 are lagging behind the cities and may not follow suit. There's no guarantee. Here you're looking at the magnitude of overbidding. You can see that in the Central Coast, sellers are actually taking a 2% price reduction with the offer coming in. Central Valley is taking about a 0.25% price reduction. North Bay is taking about 1 3/4% price increase. The Silicon Valley and the cities are on both sides of 9% increase when the offer comes in, and both of those are flat from last week. This is the frequency of overbidding. Again, the cities in the orange and the Silicon Valley in the purple are both flat. The other 3 regions are up, but at significantly lower levels, all the way down to 30% for the Central Coast, 38% for the Central Valley, 46% for North Bay, and then both sides at 70% for the cities and Silicon Valley. Here's the appreciation. Silicon Valley has had the highest rate of appreciation up here at about 96% appreciation, followed by the Central Valley having the second most, and the least is the cities. The cities has been particularly hard hit since the pandemic. Here's the median sold price for the different regions. You can see that the cities is currently a little bit more expensive than the Silicon Valley region. Central Coast has been going down and now under $1 million. North Bay has been basically flat, as well as Central Valley been basically flat. This is the monthly payments. It goes through a formula, so it's going to be in the same order as price. I am using the 30-year fixed high balance conforming rate, which is a little more expensive. Here's the table. You have the current data in the now week, and then you're comparing it to 1 week ago and 5 weeks ago. So inventory in Santa Clara County is up 5% from last week, and it is up 35% from 5 weeks ago. You have the individual 13 counties as well as the 5 regions. The regions are in the bold at the bottom. And then as an added bonus, I put in the Bay Area. I put that in because the media talks about that a lot. And it really shows you how unmeaningful it really is, because you come down here to say time on marketplace and, it'd be 39 days, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that range is all the way from 18 days in Silicon Valley all the way up to 137 days in Napa. So to use one number of 39 to represent a data point that can be anywhere from 18 to 137 is pretty unrepresentative, in my opinion. These are the chapters, again, that we are linked to in the description below. You can jump to whatever section you find the most interesting, or multiple sections. I appreciate any feedback, and thanks for listening. I'm not seeing any immunity, so take care. See you next week. Bye now.